and he focuses in. Now, at this point, his brain is pounding out of his skull. His chest hurts. He literally feels like he's dying. He's in so much pain, he feels like he's dying. And he sees these creatures. They are about 4.5 feet tall, 4 to 4.5 feet tall. And so we know there's truth there, but some people might think that, oh, it's a grift. When in reality, the memory is just so bad from these events. Like, it's so bad. It's not something you can count on. And so we just have to count on the stories, and we have to kind of like parse through it ourselves. But yeah.
Without naming names, have you, not even necessarily just on camera, but just in all your years of looking at this and talking to people, have you sat with people that are at least known a little bit by others out there, not just like a rando on Twitter or something like that, but have you sat with someone who's telling you a story and you're just like, this is complete bullshit?
I wouldn't say complete bullshit. But like I said, I think there's reason to believe that everyone telling a story, if you've told it more than once, you're making that story better as you go along. Think of the greatest tales, when you're with your buddies and you're like, oh, I got a story for you. How does that story compare to when you first, you tweak it a little bit just to get a reaction or to make people feel like they were there, or to get a laugh where it got a laugh that one time. You might throw that back in there.
Yep.
And so I think that's what's happening with these stories. And the longer we wait between the event and the telling of it, I mean, we have to assume the more muddy it gets. But that doesn't mean there wasn't something there initially. And so I think with a lot of experiencers, with Whitley Strieber, with Chris Bledsoe, with even Travis Walton. Travis Walton's different a little bit. Travis Walton doesn't waver at all. He's been one to this is it. And he gets quite defensive about any other detail being added on. He makes it very clear that this is what happened. But, you read a lot of books and you kind of it becomes subjective a little bit over time, and they start adding things. And I'm not saying it's not true. It's just hard to know.
Well, it's human nature, like you're saying. Your explanation it's in line with a lot of things. Like, you'll hear different psychology experts talk about with eyewitness testimony in court and things like that. Like, stories, people, it's not that they're lying, but sometimes details will change over time just based on what reactions are when you're telling it, and time passed, and remembering things that weren't there and stuff like that. It's just natural to what it is. So the balance becomes trying to find the things that are the common thread, the things that make sense in one story. And then also when you have things like this, where it's people talking about experiences or potentially witnessing a UFO or something like that, to where you can line up commonalities across the stories pattern-wise. So you having Travis Walton in is pretty wild, because I'm naturally very skeptical of a lot of experiencer stories. And there's some big names out there that, in my opinion, you mentioned it yourself, there are some that are just such clear grifters to me that even if there was something that happened at some point in their life, they're so far beyond that I just don't take anything they say seriously. That said, Travis Walton, he was on Joe Rogan's show 6 years ago, something like that. And he's been on some other big shows over the years. And this is a story that's 30, 40 years old.
50 in November.
50 years old. Wow.
Yeah.
God damn. Point being, though, down to the fact that his details stay the same, and like you said, he's strict with it. There's something about this one that, even on the surface, though it sounds crazy, when you watch him tell it, you're like, I don't know if that's exactly what happened, because who the fuck knows? Yeah. But I know he believes that, number one, and number two, something happened there. And just for people out there who aren't familiar with this story or forget it, can you just give the broad details of what happened when he was out in the desert there?
Yeah, it was. He was actually in the forest. It was 1975, November 5th, in Snowflake, Arizona. He was a logger, a lumberjack. Him and 6 of his buddies, including his brother, his crew, basically, were finishing
desert. Sorry,
yeah,
my bad.
Arizona.
No, why? I was
Arizona.
I was thinking that other thing.
Okay, yeah. And so, they were out there. They were finishing their shift. They were driving home. They all pile up in the truck, and they see this light in a clearing. It's kind of a weird light, pretty bright. They drive up to the clearing and notice this giant UFO, this giant flying disc that's glowing pulsating. It's got lights around it. It's dazzling. I would say, I think probably like 50 to 80 feet, like a big pretty big craft. And they all say, let's get the hell out of here. Like, what are we doing? And they're kicking the seat, like, drive, go, go, go. Because you have to understand, seeing something like that is like eldritch. It's like, it's earth shattering, right?
I don't think you can fathom it.
It shifts your paradigm instantly. It's, ontological shock, whatever you want to use, but it breaks your reality. And so they're like screaming, get the hell out of here. And Travis, being really bold and curious, gets out of the truck, approaches the craft, gets really close to it, like really close, starts hearing a noise as if it's like powering up, like a swell, and then gets hit with like this beam. And everybody who saw him get hit, instantly they thought he was dead.
Right.
They're like, oh, he's dead. Let's get out of here. So they book it. They start driving away. Now they're panicking because they're like, this is crazy. They actually end up stopping, being like, we got to go back. We got to get him, obviously. And they go back and he's nowhere to be found. They're combing this place and they can't find him. So they end up going back into town, trying to get their story straight. What do we tell the cops, right? They get the cops in. Eventually, they tell them the story. The cop now thinks there's like a murder cover-up happening, like a bad one at that.
Yeah, I mean, where else would your head go? You're
exactly.
Like,
he's doing his job.
Yeah.
So, they went out that night to look. They didn't find anything. So then the next day again, they had like a 3-day search party, like comb the forest. No sign of him whatsoever. And now this thing is starting to make like national headlines. Well, 5 days and 6 hours later, Travis, on some remote payphone, I think calls his girlfriend and is like, "Hey, I'm here," but he's like obviously like all distressed, barely talking, very, very shaken up, emaciated, dehydrated, and they pick him up, they bring him home. Frenzy of a media starts showing up to his house and trying to get the scoop, obviously. And he ends up being convinced by, I think, his brother to, do regression, hypnotherapy. And through the regression was able to realize sort of what happened. And what he remembers through that regression is he woke up on a table. Now, this was depicted by Fire in the Sky movie in 1993. D.B. Sweeney plays Travis Walton. They completely butchered this part. So in Fire in the Sky, they make it like a horrific horror movie where he's like, they're
you gotta sell
drilling stuff in his eyes. I know it's Hollywood, but they did him dirty on that because they actually cut that part out of the script when they gave him the script.
Oh, and then they put it back in.
Yeah, I bought the original storyboard or a copy of the original storyboard and showed it to Travis. And he was like, holy cow. He's like, they never showed me this.
Wow.
And so he's never seen that. So they purposely like omitted that. So
that's kind of fucked.
It is. That's Hollywood.
Yeah.
So, they wanted that at the time. But I think what happened was way more interesting than that movie. So he wakes up on this table. He sees this bright light. He sees these sort of bulbous heads hovering over him, and he focuses in. Now, at this point, his brain is pounding out of his skull. His chest hurts. He literally feels like he's dying. He's in so much pain. He feels like he's dying. And he sees these creatures. They are about 4.5 feet tall, 4 to 4.5 feet tall, giant white heads. So not your typical grays. They've got big eyes, but they're brown, like sort of hazel colored. And they're wearing orange, sort of loose fitting orange jumpers. And he's on this table and now he's freaking out. So he's like, who are you? Where am I? He realizes he's not at the hospital, which he thought he was. And he gets up off this table. His table is low to the ground. The ceiling's pretty low. The air is like musty and humid and hard to breathe, kind of claustrophobic. He reaches on this table and he finds this rod, this clear rod, he says was heavier than glass, but was transparent. And he doesn't know what it was for. He was panicking. He starts swinging it at them. He's like, get away from me, get away. He notices there were other tools, like, sort of windy, metallic tools you don't want to see, type deal.
Oh, like they're going to go to town.
Yeah, or, later on, he's come to, his thought was that they fixed him. That he got too close, they accidentally, beamed him or something, and then he was left for dead, and then they revived him, they brought him back. Like, that's what he thought. Because he's like, if they wanted, he's like, they could have dropped me off on a meteor somewhere in the asteroid belt if they wanted to. They didn't have to fix me. They didn't have to bring me back. So he's swinging at these things. These things, what frightened him the most, and this is like a wild detail, is their facial expressions never changed. And he took that as a sign of hostility. Because if you look at someone, you're going to fight them and they're just like stone cold, you know, that's like, you got to give me something, man. You got to give me a smile. You got to give me a frown. You got to give me something. Or else I'm going to think, you know, this is weird and we're going to fight. And so they weren't giving him anything. They were kind of just like, you know, doll face looking at him. And in hindsight, he's like, if they were telepathic, they wouldn't need facial features anymore.
They know what he's thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they leave. They scurry out of this room. And
he's not, so he was never like tied down or he was never handcuffed or
he had his clothes.
Like that. Yeah.
He was on a table. I did ask him this question, which I thought was really interesting. It's a detail I never heard before. I asked him if his if his feet were like hanging off the bed, off the table. And he goes, no. So I said, so it's a human-sized table, which I thought was interesting.
Wait, if the feet were hanging off the table?
Because they're small beings. I mean, the ceiling is low. He had to crouch down.
Right.
Why would the table be human-sized, right?
So his feet would be on the ground.
Yeah. So that I thought was really interesting. I was like, oh, there's a little factory somewhere and they're like making human-sized tables, right?
Yeah.
And so they go out this opening. They kind of scurry away pretty quickly. He then walks down this windy, narrow hallway, sort of crouched down, and it's turning. Now you can imagine the fear that he must have that around any of these corners, there might be another one of these things just waiting to pop out, right?
I don't think I can imagine that fear. This is like...
Dude, so he's walking around this corner thinking, I got to look for the way out. I have to find a way out. He doesn't know he's in a spaceship, right? He doesn't know where he is. So he's looking for a way out. He gets into this room where all of a sudden, as soon as he walks in, he can see what he says is like a star map. He doesn't know if it was a projection or if it was actual space, but the entire room that he's in is just space. And there's a chair in the middle of the room. And so he sits in the chair and he starts like fiddling with the buttons. He's looking for a door. And all of a sudden the star map starts shifting around him really quickly without him moving, which is kind of disorienting. And instantly a door opens up behind him.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.